How we doing down there in Las Vegas? Everybody could hear everybody? Okay.
We can hear you.
We can
All
hear
right,
you.
hang on, let's get settled up here. So Marcy, are you prepared to do a roll call today? I don't know if we're going to have a quorum or not, but. Uh, Do a roll call. We're going to call a meeting to order here, then we'll get that going. Okay, hang on a minute. All those folks down in Vegas, hang on. We got more people coming here. We'll take, just hang out for a minute. Anybody else coming in down in Las Vegas?
Yep, we hear you.
Okay. Okay, we're gonna do this then. We're gonna call a meeting of the Department of Indigent Defense Services, the executive board to order. Today is Thursday, December 19th, 2019, just after 1 p.m. We're at Legislative Council Bureau, room 3137, I believe. In Carson City, we're also in the Grant Sawyer Building at 555 East Washington Avenue, room 4412 in Las Vegas. Can we have a roll call? Does somebody want to do that? Okay, shoot.
Chris Giunchiani. I hope I didn't mess that up.
I don't see Chris here.
Ann Trom.
Trom?
Ann Trom.
Trom, yes, here, thank you.
Hi, Ann.
In Las Vegas, hi.
Rob Tillis.
I'm here.
Julie Kavanaugh Bill.
Here.
Robert Crowell.
Here.
Hi, we're in very small space here.
Lorinda Wichman.
I'm here.
I'm going to say something in a minute.
Jeff Wells. Jeff. There he is.
Jeff Wells, you down there? Where's Jeff?
I am down here. Sorry,
what I
we
thought.
were welcoming.
Okay, we got you. Okay.
Drew Christensen.
I'm down here.
Kate Thomas.
Here.
Justice William Moppin, sorry.
I don't see Bill here.
Did you
Okay.
hear that?
No, he's here in Las Vegas.
So this is
okay.
Ann. We're in a very small room here, so you can't see we're sharing two mics and you can't see most people. So we'll just try to deal with that as we go
All
on.
right, Ann. Keep them corralled down there. They can't get out of the room. Okay.
What about me? Did you go on the other sheet? You were on the first list.
Yeah,
I don't care, but I'm here.
Laura Fitzsimmons and Joni Eastley.
all right. We have more than a quorum.
Yep.
Well, now, any announcements that anybody wants to make? Anybody? This is the first meeting, big meeting, so we're gonna get, kind of organized. Might stumble a little bit here and there, but with the brain power you got down in Vegas and up here, we shouldn't stumble very much. So let's now take up public comment. Is there any public comment at the beginning of this meeting for the open meeting law? Anybody in Vegas? If there are, Jeff?
None
let me
down
know.
here.
Okay. I don't see anybody under public comment, so let's take up item 3, the approval of the minutes for the meeting dated October 9th, 2019. This is an action item. Everybody had a chance to look at those minutes?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, one minor correction,
Why don't you make a motion with a correction?
motion to approve the minutes, correcting the spelling of my last name.
I don't think that's in order.
Let's make that 2 of those. I'll add on to yours as well.
Okay,
Okay? There's a motion and there's a second, right? Did I hear that
do you
correctly?
have corrections, Dave?
Yeah, I did have a correction. My last name is misspelled on 3 different occasions in the minutes.
We'll get there. Got it? All right. Any other corrections to the minutes? Is there a second to that motion then?
I'll second it.
All right. On the motion, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Hi.
Aye.
Carried. Okay. Now let's take up item number 4. We'll move on to a PowerPoint presentation. This is going to be done by Marcy, correct? Yes. All right, let's get going.
Did you want to do the introduction of the members, or do you want to?
Yeah, I think we all know each other here, but I think we know everybody, so let's just go on.
Okay, moving on. I'm Marcy Riva. I just wanted to start off by saying thank you for choosing me to be in this position. I am so excited to be here. And the past couple of weeks, Jared came on last week, and we've been just saying, I can't believe this is our job, that we get to do this. This is just a dream. So I did want to introduce Jared Hickman. He is the deputy director that we've brought on. He likely will be, if you look at our organizational chart, and this will be fixed, and we've attached that as part of our packet, we will be moving the board to above the director. It will not be a dotted line. This was just to kind of show where we were with our office, but this will be fixed and more formalized. So I'm at this point in the director position. Jared Hickman is going to go in the position of deputy that will be over the Nevada State Public Defender's Office, is what his role will be. We have another deputy, which we have a list out to be able to hire, but at this point we're limited on space, so we're unable to hire anyone else until we're able to sign a lease for a building to actually house our department. We have our executive assistant who called roll over there. That's Cindy Atanasio. So she is available if you have any questions. She's been answering the phone. I've also attached copies of our business cards so you know how to get a hold of all of us. We have cell phones just for the office. So Jared and I have a cell phone which you can reach us at. So that cell phone is listed on the card that we've provided to you. Also, Jared and I are sharing an office phone, so we share that together, but that's that above number. And then if you note, Cindy has a different number if you want to try and get a hold of her. So that's just kind of an overview of the setup of our office at this point in time. I also wanted to let you know about our budget. So I did bring Heather Fields, who is from the budget office, and she's here. If the board has any questions for her about our budget or things that we can do with our budget, but just in case I didn't know, I brought her along.
Why don't you just hit some highlights, please?
So some highlights, some things that we will need to discuss in the future. one thing that you see on the bracket or the table is commission travel. As you can see, we are limited to our per diem in-state to $2,288 for this fiscal year, and next fiscal year it's $2,648. We also have the personal vehicle in-state reimbursement and some air travel. So I just wanted to let the board members know that we do have a limited budget for that. We will be creating a policy for board travel, which would be approved by this board. And that's just what we want to know is, you know, what this board would like to do is if there's got to be a process of, you know, requesting a reimbursement expense, travel if you'd like to appear by plane, or if it's just basically use it until it's gone, and when it's gone, we don't have any more money. Or in the alternative, we are able to set up meetings at district courts. So if, instead of traveling, if you'd like to appear, you know, possibly in Tonopah or possibly in Elko, we can use their systems so that individuals can appear for the meetings, I believe over Skype. So that is something that we can do in the future. You just need to let me know so that we can get it all set up and we can put it on our agenda so that everyone knows that this is going on. So that's been thrown out there as a possibility to try and save money until we're able to build up our next budget and ask for the money that we need in there to be able to meet as often as we need to meet. So that's where we are with our budget. The other issue that we are having is the office space rent. We do have about $1,500 a month for rent, and that doesn't allot very much space for our office. So we are out there looking as much as we can. We found a place which would fit our needs. Whether or not it can fit within our budget is something that we're waiting to hear back on. And we're being very creative. We have Victoria Gonzalez in the audience here. She's actually the executive director for the Department of Sentencing Policy, and we've talked about the possibility of throwing our departments in and merging our rents to maybe try and find something that would work. So we're being as creative as possible to try and get where we need to be. So I don't know if there's any other questions on the budget, but those were the two that we wanted to hit to discuss were to just be knowledgeable about the commission travel. We do have funds, but it is limited. And then also that we are actively trying to find a place to rent, but we're finding a limited availability within our rental budget. And once we get that place to rent, then we're going to be able to hire on more employees. If you look at the setup of our office, we have room, like we said, for one more deputy director. We also have 2 management analysts. One management analyst will be kind of more of a fiscal person that will help with the budgeting and building the budget. The other will be the management analyst that helps with the caseload study or helps to take in any sort of required, you know, if we require them to give them any information about their caseloads, they'll be getting that all together so that we can know that. Richard Whitley from the Department of Health and Human Services has been kind enough to let us house one management analyst at his office, and he's willing to have them trained at his office as well until we get our space. So we are getting a lot of help from others within the state, and we are reaching out. So we do have our position out there. We are trying to get it posted, and we're working on that. And then the other position we have would be the administrative assistant too. So we haven't been able to fill that either.
Are there any questions of Marcy? The South, anybody?
Mr. Chair?
Up here?
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
I have one question. Marcy, how much flexibility is there in your budget in terms of travel? I can't imagine that just meeting once a month with the few of us who have to drive to Carson City that we're going to exceed the budgeted amount for travel. But if nobody flies, would you be able to use that money for other travel?
Thank you. Did you want to answer that, or? Okay.
Hi there, Heather Field for the record. So I think what the question is if we don't use the airfare budget, can we use this money on, let's say, mileage or per diem within that same category? So the answer is yes, we can charge expenditures for other items that are within that category that fit that budget amount for the category.
Great, thank you.
How do they request reimbursement?
So we're actually training that right now. To request for reimbursement, there's actually a process. So really what you should do is have a travel request filled out. That is obviously your request for travel, which is a single form. After the travel is complete, then you'll turn in what's called a travel request reimbursement form. So there's two forms. One before you travel, so we know what you're going to spend. One after you travel, so we know what to pay you. We're training Cindy on this process right now. We'll show her those forms and have those available to you guys. It's likely that the Indigent Defense Department will fill those forms out for you, and then either submit them to you for your signatures and your review.
Go.
Thank you so much. Now, you didn't lump in budget for staff with budget for board members, is it lumped in? So that's a separate item?
Yeah, Heather Field again, those are in separate categories. So
Okay.
the in and out of state travel for the staff is in categories 3 and 2. I believe it's category 10. What is our
3 and travel's 10.
10? Yeah. So commission travel and air is in our category 10.
And those couldn't be mixed? We couldn't, what I'm thinking is if we all just, because we have we have very little money.
Right.
And obviously, if we can Skype from courthouses or whatever, we would minimize whatever travel requests by board members. If that could go then into help the staff go out into the counties to do their research, that
So-
might be an additional motivation, if that's possible.
If there is a savings created in category 10, which is travel that's set aside specifically for the board, yes, that budget can be moved into categories 2 and 3 to be spent on the staff travel. That's a process. It requires a work program and approval from the finance office, and if it exceeds any parameter, possible meetings that goes before the interim finance committee. Because those amounts are so small right now, I doubt those parameters will come up this first and second year.
Go, Joe.
One additional question. For those of us who are just coming off of a term with the previous Indigent Defense Commission, we used to just turn in our hotel receipt and staff took care of the rest of it. Just be sure and let us know if that's going to be different.
It sounds like that'll be more of the same. We're chatting about that now. It's typical that would happen, that we would fill out those forms and then just send them to you via email for review. Yeah.
Any other questions for Heather? Anybody? Go.
Sorry, I'm sorry, but this is just such an opportunity. Now realizing, I went up just to look at office space briefly. You guys are doing a whole bunch of that. And I'm realizing, this budget we're grateful for it. But now that we actually are getting numbers, if we save money now by really scrimping on something that may not be ultimately something that is in the best interest of our goal, can we kind of document that? Because when do we start to prepare the budget for next session?
Yeah, so the budget process will open up starting February. We'll do a budget kickoff in February, and then the actual budget system will open up about, I want to say, March or April. That's the point where the agencies can get into the system, start building their budgets. That's when these guys will be busy, and then that's when they can request more or an additional amount for rental expenses. So we're watching that right now. We know that rental expense will increase in the future, and so we're already preparing to build what we call an enhancement decision unit to request more funds for that. Does that answer your question?
That does answer the question, and maybe I know.
All right.
Okay, the bigger question is, I think we all anticipate, I testified, obviously, in favor of this bill, and there was a bunch of discrepancy about money and what it would cost, and I basically said, because it was my understanding, if you just give us what Mr. Weldon had included or what went in the governor's budget, that'll get us to the point where we can come back with real numbers, for really what they need to do and we need to support. So I guess my question is, we're not even going to have a handle on that in February and March, because it sounds like we'll just probably, hopefully, be getting an office, and we'll be getting information from the counties. What do we have a cutoff for next session for like, if we believe, let's say it's gonna cost $5 million, is there a cutoff for that, to include that? And that's kind of our target date in my mind, for the
So
big picture.
the agency's budget submission should be to the governor's finance office by September 1st.
Thank you.
And then that's when the governor's finance office has that budget in their hands, and my review begins at that time. The conversations happen between the finance office and the governor's office, and the budget is, cleaned and prepared to make its way to that next layer, branch of government, the legislative branch of government. So to answer your question, September 1st.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Marcy, have you ever put one of these budgets together? You've done that?
Yes, I have. I was in the Nevada State Public Defender's Office, so I did go over with
You
Karen
know, you know the
Kreisbeck.
process.
Yes,
Okay.
and we are learning things that are not in the current budget. For example, subscriptions. There's no funds for us to have Westlaw, so we're trying to find out ways for us to afford that for the next 2 years, and we're kind of missing some items for the office too. We don't have any budget for that. So we're scrimping and saving. So if you'd like to donate any notebooks, you can donate them to us.
Do we have any funds for, say, take Westlaw or Nexus? Do we have any funds where we could, say, go to the State Public Defender's Office and use that, just as not as our own, but just pay them for it?
So you want to keep the expenditures that are specific to indigent defense within the indigent defense budget. As far as sharing funds, there'd have to be justification for that, and if you're preparing, I want to say, any sort of cost allocation, that also has an approval process. So I guess to answer your question, we want to keep that really within the indigent defense if they're using it.
Okay.
And if I could add something to that, I know that the Nevada State Public Defender has LexisNexis, but it's provided by the county through the courts. So we couldn't necessarily get onto their subscription. We did contact a representative from Westlaw to see if there was any possibility of using any open subscriptions or anything like that, but we've been told that we have to sign our own contract for 3 attorneys that we're going to be having. And we did work that out, but we were able to work it out for a 24-month period that we're going to try and pay out of this fiscal budget, which we should hopefully have some extra money in since we don't have any place to rent yet. We aren't spending any of that rent money.
Marcy,
So-
can you give us an idea what that subscription costs?
The subscription was
$6 per month.
$276 a month.
Marcy, can you tell us also, is that for just a couple of licenses, or is that an enterprise license for many users?
That's 3 licenses for the 3 attorneys that are going to be in our office, and there's different levels that you can get access to on Westlaw. We requested that high of a level because it allows us to pull federal cases and also regulations, which I think will become necessary when we're providing you with information as to what we think we should make the regulations be, so that we could provide you with what other states are doing.
Okay, so I'm guessing, are we on track then for this type of service? Can we limp along for a while?
Yes, we are able to cover that. We've requested the bill for the 2-year period, which we're going to pay out of this bill cycle. And like we said, we do have salary savings because we only have 3 employees at this point in time. We do have rental savings that we can pull it from as well. So we should be fine with that. But when we're building our next budget, that's just an example of something in addition that we're going to need to put in there.
Heather, is there any, on rent, is there any latitude? Because we've got 7 employees, $1,500 a month. That's going to be maybe, depending on rent, utilities and things, that's going to be not enough to even squeak. They're in a cave down south. We're going to be in an even smaller cave. Is there any way we could move around that to get any little more money out of that?
So like Marcy said, we are trying to be really creative, and we've kind of recruited the sentencing policy department to see if they can move in with us. There are two other new agencies, the Department of New Americans and the Patient Protection Commission, that have, I believe, maybe 2 and 3 employees each, that we could also try and combine with to get a bigger space and a more accommodating space. That said, when we talk about salary savings and we have possibly some rent savings, we're thinking of that to get us through the first year, and then maybe creating savings in that second year to continue that second year lease. The other options are negotiating a lower rate for that first and second year until we can get through that budget build for the next biennium and request a little higher rate. So we do have some thoughts out there. We're basically waiting to see if the owners of some of these leased buildings will work with us on that.
And Marcy, I had a couple leads. They all fell through, and I told them I had $1,500 to spend. So, but I'll continue to look. All right. Anything else on the budget?
Nothing else on the budget, and I can go into the PowerPoint if you would like
Yeah,
to
go.
focus on that. And in the PowerPoint, I just want to let you know that what we're thinking about is focusing on what are the board's duties. And that's why in Assembly Bill 81, we're kind of focusing on Section 8. I gave you a copy of the full Assembly Bill. I also cut and pasted Section 8, which was a little easier to read without the blue italics, so that you could kind of see what the board's whole goals here and what we're trying to do. So your first duties, obviously, are you oversee the executive director. So you oversee us. You receive reports from us. These are going to be annual reports that we're going to be providing. You're going to review any recommendations that we make to you, and these recommendations are what we're hoping to have for you at the next meeting when we meet again. You are going to provide direction for us if you would like us to go in a certain way with the recommendations we're doing, or any sort of standards that we're recommending. You are going to direct us to conduct any sort of audit that you deem necessary if you feel that maybe a certain county or a certain place is not complying with the minimum standards. You could request that we conduct some sort of audit. And again, that's likely where that management analyst too would be used to help to do that audit. You are to help us develop procedures for mandatory data collection, and then also to review and also approve our office budget. So that's why I provided you with what our current office budget is, so that you know what it is, and then to review it in the future and approve that. And now when we get to our mandatory duties, this is really what we're going to be working on. Now, Jared and I have had a lot of discussions about what this section means. If you look at Section 8, is it B2? 2, yeah, Section 2. You see that there's some standards that are listed out in like an A, and then in D it goes to subsections under that. So in AB 81, Section 8, subsection 2A, it says that we are supposed to establish minimum standards, and in these standards we are supposed to ensure that services meet constitutional requirements, that there is no sort of economic disincentive.
Good luck with that part.
Yes, and that we do not impair the ability of a defense attorney to provide effective representation. And what Jared and I have come to the belief, and obviously you are the board that directs us if you believe that we're meeting the wrong belief on this, is that we think that this is supposed to be kind of the overarching principles of our office. So an example of 10 overarching principles is the ABA 10 principles that's been referred to previously. For example, and I can provide you all with copies of this, number one of that is the public defense function, including selection, funding, and payment of defense counsel, is independent. So that's kind of the overarching standard, and then we'd have to create regulations, which we're going to talk about in a second, which would basically be our tools to make sure that our standards or our principles are being met. So when we're establishing those overarching principles, we have to keep in mind that we meet constitutional requirements, no economic disincentives, and that we don't impair the ability of that defense attorney to provide representation. Other mandatory duties: we are required to establish a procedure to receive complaints and develop resolutions to the complaints. So in the next board meeting, we are going to be presenting to you, if I'm able to set it up that time, a procedure possibly through our website where we could have a form that individuals could fill out and send in. So I will be proposing that at the next meeting. Establish a way for appointed attorneys to request reimbursement for trial expenses. We have to work with the law school to establish incentives for rural public defense, and we also have to review laws and recommend legislation for constitutional representation. Now, those tools that we talked about earlier to try and reach the goals of our overarching standards, that's going to be here in subsection D. And that's where we have to adopt regulations for indigent defense services. And Sophia Long from the Attorney General's office a little later on is going to talk to us about regulations and how long it generally takes. Because I wanted everyone to know, I'm sure you already do know, as to how long this is actually going to be or what we're looking at when we're trying to carry out our ultimate goals. So the regulations that we are supposed to adopt to establish standards are including but not limited to, we have to establish specific continuing legal education and experience requirements. We have to require attorneys to track time and to provide reports. Now, at some point, there probably will be a recommendation for some sort of model contract where we include in there this sort of provision that they are required to track time, because that's also set out in AB 81 that we have to have a contractual provision in all of their contracts that they are required to comply with us and track their time. Establish uniform reporting standards.
Marcy, before you go on, so as you're going through that process, one of the concerns that I had as reading through the material is that I think the one thing we want to try to avoid is making them become data collectors and clerical people, so they can spend time doing what they're really supposed to be doing. So, and if there's a way to do that, that would be great.
And I completely agree with you. We've had several discussions with other departments of indigent defense, and I understand that individuals that are out there working, they have limited time to, number one, they've got to deal with their caseloads, and then for us to add anything on top of it to require them to do any sort of reporting, we are very aware, and that's something that we've been talking about as aware as well, is what numbers do we specifically need, and what are we really trying to get at? In other states, you know, they've told me that they've been collecting numbers and they've done nothing with it. And I'm very aware, because I've had to give my numbers. It takes time to do that. And if you want something really specific, at the end of the week, you know, what are you going to focus on? Your client or getting these numbers in? So we want to make it as easy as possible for individuals to be able to do that. And that's why what we're discussing is really focusing what information we want and why we want it. We just don't want to ask something which really has nothing behind it. So we're very aware of that. We've been talking about that as well. And that kind of goes into something that, you know, I was going to bring up a little later in one of my sub-points, is the Delphi study, which other states have done to actually establish caseloads. And when we are creating our uniform reporting standards, is this something that we just want to throw out there and say, hey, start giving us numbers right away? Or is this something that we want to hold off on and say, let's look at getting one of these studies done first. Let's see what information they want, and then we'll model our reporting standards to what information the person that's doing the study actually needs to do the study. So that's something that we'll have to talk about in future meetings, is what are we trying to get with this? What information do we need? You know, clearly one thing that we'll have to track is whether or not they're complying with our standards. For example, the continuing legal education standard. If we have that, we're going to have to ask them about those numbers. But I am very aware that we don't want to make this any more time consuming for these attorneys than we need to. So the uniform reporting standards, again, we want to make it not time consuming. Establishing the guidelines to determine the maximum caseloads. This is that Delphi study that other states have done. These are extremely expensive. They cost $200,000 to $250,000 to complete, is the number I'm getting as a guesstimate. I have seen the requests from Michigan, New York, and Utah, and that's where we kind of got the information as to how much it was going to be. We obviously, I've shown you the budget. We don't have money at this point in time for this study, so I don't know if you would like us to proceed with a request for information, which is a form that we'd fill out. We would submit it out there, and we would get individuals that would be would get basically a number of how much they think it would cost. Once we have that request for information, since we don't have money in the budget, we would have the choice of either waiting until our next budget build and adding this into our next budget build, or if this is something that the board thinks is imperative that we do as quickly as possible, we are also able to go to interim finance. Interim finance to request additional funds. And this is something that, is kind of a last resort, but if it's something that is important and we need to get it done, that's where we're gonna have to go to get the money.
Marcy, are we stopping to, you're going to get back to the Delphi study later?
Yeah, we can discuss it later,
Yeah, because do anyone see any downside in asking, you guys making a request for information? I mean, there's no commitment or downside, just to find out who's willing to do it and what it would cost?
I don't believe there's any downside, and that's why we wanted to bring it up. Is that where we want to go immediately, is to look into getting this caseload study, or would we prefer to establish the standards? We are willing to go with whatever you feel is the best way to go first.
This is Ann
Marcy,
from
Ann.
the South.
Sorry.
Hi, Ann, go.
Hi. Well, I wanted to mention that Jean Culiani, joined us a while back, and we've just haven't said anything. And she's not on camera, but she does have a comment. So I want to note her attendance and her presence, and then also give her the mic.
Hi, Chris.
I think I was going to, hi,
How
how
you
are
doing?
you doing? I think I was just going, I woke up this morning, it's a good way to start. I think when I talked to the speaker, there is an opportunity for interim finance, so I don't think we should dismiss that as a potential for us to make some requests early on to at least get the work done that we need to make some recommendations down the road. Otherwise, we're just spinning around in a circle, and if I were ACLU, I'd be saying, sorry, you know what, you didn't comply with anything we needed you to do. So at some point as a board, we can have that discussion, and I think Ms. Fitzsimmons' point is well taken too. We might as well find out what's out there and what those costs are so we can build something properly to make a request to IFC then. Thank you.
Could I add just a little comment
Sure.
also? It seems to me, this is Ann Trum. So it just seems to me there's a little bit of a chicken and egg problem about data collection, which is if you don't start collecting data right away and you're waiting for money, you might not have the justification to show that you need it and how urgent it is. So I'm wondering if when you make a request for information or are talking to other offices, you actually at least could assemble a little bit of a data framework, right, which might be refined later when you're actually in a study, getting the information. I totally hear your point about we need to have be collecting the information that we actually need to do a proper study. But I also think there's another aspect of it, which is we might need to start collecting data now in order to justify the request to do what you need to do and get us on that track. Thanks.
Okay, Loretta, go.
Thank you. Marcy, I'm just a little bit confused because I did my homework. I read all that, and I can't point to it because I didn't mark it out. But I could have swore I read something in there about having a $10 million budget. Where'd I get that? Do you know?
Yes, it was. There was a reference.
You're not on the mic, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know,
Just try to be quiet about it.
it was.
I think that we could answer that when AB 81 was in the legislature, there was a line item for $15 million to try and pay for it, but that was taken out of the bill. So the amount of money that we have for our budget is what I've provided to you. There is no additional money.
I'd like to, because it's appearing that, because we do have, and everybody chime in that was part of this, but with AB 81, several of us were on a commission, and the very last day, basically, we got the bare bones of a bill draft passed. We had deadlines, and Teresa Benitez Thompson graciously took the bill in for us. And initially, my recollection was there was no fiscal note. And we all know this is going to cost something. We spent years talking about it, and we have all acknowledged it's the state of Nevada's responsibility not essentially the counties. So in a vacuum, essentially, a $10 million, as I recall it, number was put on the bill at some point. And we had no facts. We don't know what it's going to cost, and that's our job now, and your job primarily. We don't know if there's a problem. I mean, I believe there's a problem or we wouldn't be here, but we don't know what it's going to cost to set standards and create the funding to effectuate those standards.
But
so
Laura,
the 10 million.
part of that 10 million, as I recall, part of that 10 million was to assist counties in meeting their obligation under the law to provide indigent defense.
Right, that's exactly what I'm saying. Some counties are compliant. I mean, you know, we don't know until this work is done, but we're relatively confident that there's many counties that are compliant, and I'm pretty, unfortunately, confident there are some counties that aren't. We don't have a number. So when it went to the money committees, it's just literally, it was taken by an equation of all indigent defense in the state and a percentage, and that included Washoe and Clark counties, which, you know, I'm pretty sure are compliant. So I thought our job now and your job is to get whatever we can get done, and I'm so grateful, Ms. Gianciliani, to hear the information you provided. I thought we were supposed to get up, get a study, figure out what it's going to cost, meet that September 1st deadline, and see, is it, you know, what do we believe realistically we can go to the legislature with and say we have 4 counties and they're going to need 3 new lawyers and it's our obligation to pay for it, you know. So that's that 10 million. It came and went. It came and went in about 6-week period during the legislature, and then they pulled it out, and here we are with a bare bones budget.
Thank you for that.
So the next step, what would be your suggestion? You want to have this board tell you it's okay to go out and get information, or you want you to go find a way to get into the Delphi system?
I just wanted to know if you were supportive of the idea of doing the request for information, or if you felt that was
Request
not
for
a reasonable
information from
request.
whom?
Request for information for individuals that could do the study for us, and they basically tell us how much they think it would cost, and then I could bring that back to you. And the only reason I bring it up is because in order to do a request for information, it is a form that we have to fill out, and it will be a time-consuming form. It will need to be posted by the purchasing department, so this all can be done. But I didn't want to go this way until I had basically the agreement of the board that you were fine with me going that direction.
Okay, well, I think under the open meeting law and under as I read our agenda, we could make that recommendation to you here. So is there anybody who objects to having Marcy and our staff go out and get that type of information? I don't hear anybody. So you're authorized to do that.
Thank you. And I did want to follow up with what Antrom did say about the...
Excuse me, wait, pardon me, sorry.
Okay, shoot.
I'm just getting a alert here that we should do that by motion.
Yeah.
So perhaps we
We
could
could do
convert
it by
that into a
motion, but
motion and then we could,
Try a little
thank you.
shortcut. Just shortcut here.
Mr.
So-
Chair, I'll make a motion to authorize Marcy and her staff to gather information concerning the Delphi study and bring it back to the board for
Second.
future consideration.
Yeah. Is that okay for a motion? Actually, you know what, I disagree with that,
already heard a
but
second.
motions are fine. Don't worry about it. Okay, on the motion, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
South, I
Aye.
didn't hear you guys. Okay. Nay, anybody?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Anybody is no? Okay. Motion passed. All right.
Thank you. I did want to just
Thank you.
update on what Antrom brought up about how we should be getting information, or people should be providing us with information. The state public defender, the Nevada State Public Defender, does annually turn in numbers of how many cases they have, how many were opened, how many were closed, and they're split up like that. The Elko Public Defender also has the same form that they fill out. Every other attorney has a different form that they fill out and a different way of doing it. We have an Excel spreadsheet that we have to tape together because, you know, it's about 6 pages long, going vertically. So it just shows that we need to have some sort of uniformity in what we're doing. We've had other individuals that have provided numbers, which we don't necessarily know what it means, but we have obtained contracts for most of the counties, and we also have obtained numbers for the past year for about half of the counties. So at the next meeting, we are planning on presenting that information to you so that you guys know how they are reporting at this point, and we can go off that. Going back to, again, the regulations that we will have to complete are requiring vertical representation, and this will likely be done in a model contract once we create a model contract. Other required regulations are we have to establish a formula, and I don't know if this is something that the board would like to add on or act on quickly. We have to determine some sort of formula as to the maximum amount a county is required to pay for indigent defense services. So likely we will be putting in a formula of 2018 plus any sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Inflation. And so we'll be proposing something like that at the next board meeting. But I don't know if it's the board's desire to try and establish that maximum formula as quickly as possible, but we will be proposing that as well. And then we have to adopt any other necessary regulations that we see fit. On the slide, I've also provided you with our contact information, which I have cards for everyone that's up north, and I can mail cards to those down south, or if you just want to have the information from the PowerPoint. And again, you can get a hold of Jared or I, and also Cindy. So I wanted to make sure you had our contact information. And then finally on the PowerPoint, I have the budget that we've already discussed. So.
We have a comment down here. Hold on a second.
Comments, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Two questions. If staff could find out what's currently in the state contingency account, I haven't been able to find it online.
I can't hear you too well, Chris.
Sorry. Let me come in closer. If staff could find out how much is in the state contingency account currently, because I think that could be a potential revenue place that we could take a look at through IFC, but it's not online that I could find. And then secondarily, in Section 8, 3.3, she just mentioned we have to come up with a formula for funding. So I do think we need to start at least kicking around what that should look like, so that we're not behind the 8 ball on that part of it. So I think for the next agenda, that makes good sense. Thank you.
Heather, can we get that information for the contingency? All right. We'll have that information. Okay, anything else from down south there? Okay, let's see where we are then on this. Before we get to, maybe we could do it under future agenda items too, when we're discussing AB 81, but I think we ought to take a look at what our next steps are and what we should direct the staff to be doing. And I think Chris just mentioned one of those. I'd also kind of think we might want to talk about establishing not subcommittees but work groups that would be taking a look at different sections of AB 81 under Section 8. For instance, one work group might take a look at how we're going to integrate with the University of Las Vegas Law School and things like that. Anybody have any thoughts on what our next steps should be? Anywhere up? Ann?
Yeah, so this is Ann Trump. So I am very enthusiastic about working at UNLV to help the board do its work and to help the office do its work. And I've already recruited a team of 6 volunteer students. So I think who are working on these issues, and our goal is to have some product in the spring. These are all 3Ls, and they've got a number of projects going. And then we also would like to assist the director in some of her tasks, like setting up standards. And I think one of the questions that we need answered is just whether we can have whether I should be doing this just with my students or whether other people want to be involved and whether there are open meeting implications to other people being involved, for example, in a work group, because we're not sure how that works.
Well, I think, Marcy, we've kind of talked about this internally. I think if we set up work groups where it is not a formal subcommittee of this board, that it doesn't have to comply with the open meeting law. But if you actually move to create a subcommittee, that has to be noticed, and all the accoutrements of the open meeting law apply to that. So what I was suggesting is, not that I want to get around the open meeting law, but I want to be able to facilitate things so we get off the ground, is just to have, work groups that would say, like you, Ann, I'd like to take over that integration with the College of Law, and whoever you've got, and then make a report back to us. We can put that on the agenda. I think there may be others who know the open meeting law better than I do, but I think that that's permissible under the open meeting law without having to go through publishing agendas for subgroups and things of that nature.
That sounds great for us, for me. I'm doing it anyway. So I guess my sort of request to the board is that I am heading this up with my students at UNLV. And if there's someone who's particularly interested in either that work in general or a particular aspect of it, like researching the standards, you should maybe contact me and you can sort of informally join our meetings or know what we're talking about when we get together. That would just be when I meet with my students. That would be an easy way to do it.
Everybody hear that? If you want to help participate on an informal basis with Ann, let her know.
This Chris,
Chris,
Mr. Chair?
yeah.
I think that's an excellent idea, and you're right. You're not trying to get around the open meeting law, it's just to facilitate getting some work done, and then we can formalize what we need to formalize. I would make sure that if there's pre-law programs anyplace else within the state, so that we're getting a voice from the rurals as well as Northern Nevada, that could maybe reach out, and they can maybe be assigned some tasks to do from Elko or from Ely or someplace else, so we don't forget about that. And Ann wants to comment, and then I have another idea.
So on that, I just wanted to add that my students and I are already focused on sort of including, sort of reaching out to the rurals, and then Julie Kavanaugh-Bill, who's sitting right next to me, not sure if you can see her or not, is in the rurals, and so she's happy to work with our group and our students on that. So we will make that part of our plan. So back to you.
And then I do think we should have one on budget and or funding formula or where else resources could come as an informal work group to start. I would ask if there'd been any work done by the previous commission that maybe we could use that as a basis to work from. And I think Drew was saying, yes, there were several formulas that had been looked at by the previous commission and that had been an iteration in the legislation as AB 81 was moving forward. So just so we could maybe do a secondary one that looks at the numbers.
I agree with
and we
that.
could
I think
facilitate.
I don't recall that type of analysis being done during the interim before AB 81. Anybody else know that? I don't think it was
Drew's
done.
nodding his head, so he wants to make a comment. If you don't mind.
I thought we in our previous this is Drew Christensen for the record. I thought in some of our previous iterations of the bill, there were funding formulas that capped the county's expenses going forward and I don't recall specifically, but I do recall it was whatever they've spent the last 3 fiscal years, you take that average, and that would be their responsibility, and the state would be on the hook past there. But some of that work has been done. I don't think we should recreate the wheel when some of us have knowledge from previous committees of those kind of discussions.
Yeah, I recall that it was, this is Jeff Wells, I recall that it was the average of the previous 3 years plus CPI, and that's what the cap was going to be for the rural.
I think, Marcy, it's in the AB 81. There's a statement to that effect. Do you
We
recall?
were not able to find any sort of formula set forth. I think that might have been some sort of prior legislation that did not pass when they were requiring everyone to go into the public defender's office.
I think what happened is there were these formulas everybody's discussing, but my recollection, I think you referred to it in your presentation, is, and I defer to other people who were part of this, but AB 81 says that the county's obligation shall not be more than it was like in the previous fiscal year plus inflation.
She's right.
So that's it. So, and obviously, what the data we would need then is what each county's paid. And I think that Clark and Washoe took themselves out of that. But for the rural counties, so the average of 3 years and all that was jettisoned in favor of what's in AB 81, and that's very clear. But speaking of which, I'm just wondering, when we're talking about this idea of work groups, I mean, looking here and looking down south, there are people among us that have distinct areas, reasons each of us is on this commission. And Mr. Christensen and Mr. Wells, doesn't Clark County require its contract lawyers to report time? I mean, because I'm just thinking if basically the assumption is that Clark County's in compliance and Clark County hires conflict counsel and pays them, I mean, have you provided your reporting grid to Marcy, I guess would be my question. And do you feel like that you could work with her on that?
Sure, Lori, this is Drew. Yeah, we've generated a lot of that material over the last decade, and being a member of the Indigent Defense Commission out of the Supreme Court, you know, we've already established, I say we, there's kind of a working understanding of what the definition of a case is. And so when there's a lot of information that Marcy needs to comply, we've done a lot of that work. So I think what I can provide from Clark County is model plans. I can provide contracts that we ask our attorneys to sign. We can provide grids as far as how the attorneys in Clark County keep track of their time, how they report that time. And so it's part of our current contract. Now based on what we heard from the Sixth Amendment Center, there are so many various models around the state on how the counties are complying with defense. And so there's going to have to be some tweaks per counties. But I think it's at least a good starting point to utilize what Washoe and here in Clark, what we've done to capture the work product of the lawyers, and then ultimately look at that work product and make a determination as to whether that's constitutionally adequate.
Drew,
Jeff.
We argued for 11 years about what the definition of a case was. I didn't recall that we had reached a decision.
I still have that in my notes. What's a case?
In Justice Cherry's Indigent Defense Commission, my memory of the definition of a case is an individual defendant, regardless of the number of charges, in an individual charging document, whether it be an information complaint or indictment. And so we've been counting cases, and I say we, when we meet quarterly in the Indigent Defense Commission, all the jurisdictions, at least within Clark County, report the numbers the same. So it's an individual client, defendant, regardless of the set of charges, on an individual charging document. And so that's how the defense has been counting the cases for the last decade in Clark County. Now, you're right. There is a lot of ways around the state that it's been counted, but at least within the members of that group, we came to a consensus that we like that definition and been using it.
This is Jeff Wells. I just want to add on to what Drew just said. This was a little subcommittee. I was on it. Franny Forsman was on it. I think Nancy Becker was on it. And I forget if there was somebody else. And so while that single case from a court point of view might have one number and from the DA's point of view might have one number, if we had 3 defendants, we had 3 numbers, and that was counted as 3 cases. And that's how we have been calculating it the whole time here. And I just want to add one more thing. On the slide that Marcy had under mandatory duties, one of the things she had was establish a way for appointed attorney to request reimbursement for trial expenses. We had that in our model plan, and we do it now. We actually have them. We have forms that require them to submit to us for investigators, for experts, etc. The travel, all of those things are routinely approved. I think Drew probably goes through a dozen of those a week, if not more. So all of those things can be sent up to Marcy because we actually have that plan and have been doing it for a decade.
Okay.
This is Rob Tejas, and I was just wondering if it's possible, if we could actually, and I don't know if the committee before I came on board has already gotten copies of this, but if we get a copy or two of Delphi studies for other jurisdictions, other states, so that we can review those and be a little better prepared for future discussions.
I'm not sorry, heard all that.
I can say something. Franny's talking, I think. Two on the internet.
That's okay. Okay, we can't hear what's going on down there, but that's all right. If you got, okay, probably don't want to. So I need some help on the cap.
The,
Yeah, go.
the really short version is we're being chastised for spinning the microphone around, so we're going to have to rotate the seats at the desk every time somebody wants to talk.
We've got to address those big topics, so, all right.
I think Marcy can answer the question that was just posed about the availability of Delphi studies.
Yes, the reason that we learned about those is we did talk to the executive director from Michigan. They had some done that are available online, and I can provide links to all the board members so that they can look at that website. It is an extremely informative website. We've been looking at it a lot to see if we can pull some ideas from it. We've also talked to Utah. They are planning on having one done, so obviously theirs is not established. There's also been one done in Rhode Island and Louisiana by a different group, so we can provide you those as well.
Okay, you'll get that data for us?
We will get that to you.
Okay, on the cap for counties, I need some help because maybe I'm reading the law wrong here, but under section 14 of AB, section 14, subsection 2 of AB 81, it says if the plan established pursuant to subsection 1, that's a plan of correction, will cause the county to expend more money than budgeted by the county in the previous budget year, plus inflation for the provision of indigent defense services, the executive director shall include the additional amount needed by the county in the next budget for the Department of Indigent Defense Service to help support, pay for that bill. Am I reading that wrong? Okay. So we do need, I don't know that we need information from the counties now, but if there's a corrective action do we have to take, we're going to need that information, what they budgeted. But we probably should have what they budgeted anyway.
And we can get that information. There was paperwork submitted when AB 81 was presented to the legislature that says what was spent by each county for the last fiscal year, and we should also be able to get where they're at this year that we can present. We're planning on giving to you that in the packet for the next meeting when we actually discuss more of this.
Very good. And then on a work group, Chris, can we have, is she still there? Is Chris there? Oh, she got to run around there, okay.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Can we ask you to kind of take a look at how we work with the finances here on getting some of these things through either interim finance or, what's the best way to proceed from a fiscal standpoint to get things paid for?
I'm happy to help with that, and then anybody that's interested, north or south, let me know, and we can do some by phone if that's the case, or however we need to handle that. And I think it would be helpful, because that restriction's in statute now in AB 81. We don't know if the local counties were actually cash-strapped, and therefore they did it on a limited budget. So it's kind of a weird way to fund something. So even though we're stuck with that, maybe part of the recommendations are to come up with how should it have been funded so that it is accommodating and making sure that we're actually providing indigent defense in the long run. So happy to help with that part of it. Thank you.
But Bob, Mr. Chairman, that is tied to the corrective action plan.
Yeah,
You do know that, right?
I know that's what I wanted some help on, because I know it's tied to the corrective action
Right.
plan, but I don't know that, it seems to me that that's a baseline of what the counties can be asked to do, whether it's a corrective action plan or not, because if they're, otherwise the county's just budgeted. It seems to me that language in the statute says what the obligation of the county will be. I mean, if they're marching down the road, they're doing everything right in their budget, then we don't have to worry about it. But if there's a plan of corrective action that's proposed,
Right.
then that's when the cap comes in play. So maybe I'm missing all that, Joni, but.
Mayor, in section 8, paragraph 3, it says the board shall adopt regulations to establish a formula for determining the maximum amount that a county may be required to pay for the provision of services. So you have it in there as a duty to establish a formula here Then the section you were reading earlier is in the event that we come up with a caseload standard, for example, that would require a county to hire a bunch of extra lawyers that they don't have the money for, that's when that additional money in the section you read is asked for by Marcy to the legislature to pay. And then in the event they don't pay it, then it would trigger
Or
back to
can't.
this paragraph that we would say. Yeah, or can't. Yeah. So it's actually in there twice. One's for solving what you have to ask the legislature for, and the other one is for a formula for their maximum amount.
And this is a part of the bill, if you remember, Laura, I spoke against this because the counties are behind the 8 ball no matter what happens. If the corrective action plan is recommended and the counties cannot come up with the money to implement the corrective action plan, then they can go back to the state and request that the state take over the indigent defense function, which is significantly more expensive for them to do than if the county were to do it themselves. So they're stuck no matter which way you look at it. I did not like that part of the bill.
This is my understanding. The counties currently, and, you know, all of the counties have a significant part of their budgets devoted to indigent defense services. And it may or may not go up or down depending on what the counties are, but we've heard forever that the rural counties are doing worse financially every year, not better. So I think it's fair to accept the fact that the counties aren't all of a sudden going to be coming up with $100 million for the rural counties for indigent defense. So I think those budget numbers are going to stay, and we've seen historically they have stayed flat year by year. The rural counties, you know, there's not much deviation on what they've been budgeting. We come in, so we need that information, and it's available. We come in because, remember, that I think the overriding mandate that those of us on the prior commission, and that the bill states in a preamble, is ultimately it's the duty of the state of Nevada from the state budget to pay for indigent defense. So if there's remedial action needed, if in some county the quality of defense is constitutionally deficient, the state's going to have to pay for that, right?
So that's my understanding.
Right. So that's where we come into, and so I disagree with you a little, Joni, because if there's some, I rarely do, if there's some county that's just really, you know, a bad boy county, and they don't have the money, and they're not at all close to standards, and you say you've got to do X, Y, and Z, and they say we don't have the money, you're going to have to go to the legislature and get it. I mean, isn't that what we all talked about?
Yeah, but the legislature could say no.
Well, let's not borrow trouble, as my grandmother used to say.
Thanks.
Not.
This is Chris. I'll just editorialize that within a formula, we could also make some recommendations on where resources of revenue could be found to assist the state as well as the counties. And that could be something that we come up with as a recommendation that could be looked at. And then that gives us a better opportunity. So it could ease Clark and Washow's percentage. That could help the counties the rurals come into compliance, and have a fiscal source that's there permanently so that we don't get sued again and we don't neglect people's proper rights in the long run. So that's my thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll announce it real quick.
Okay.
Nothing. Yeah. Hi, this is Chuck with Broadcast and Production Services. Hey, we're going to take a quick break and switch rooms for you guys down in Vegas, because that room does not look like the best tool for the job. And then we'll reconnect the video conference. Does that sound good to everybody? It'll just take us 2 minutes to do.
Yeah, okay, well, we'll let you know. They're gonna move you around down there. Okay, so we'll be in recess for, until they come back and tell us you guys have got a place to move. Let us know when you're there, and then we'll take up where we just left off. Thanks.
Hello, check.
Hello, how you doing, Wakanda?
Good.
All right, mic check, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Check, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There we go.
You can come down 6 for me.
All right, let's give this a whirl. Mic check, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Check, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
All right. Sounds good. Looks good on my end. Mic check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Check.
Sounds good, looks good on my end. Is everything good up in the control room? And we're good. Thank you very much, Wakanda, and thank you, everyone on the committee.
Are we ready down there in Vegas? Hello in Vegas. We ready? And
I think we're all here, yep.
okay. Back on the topic of the cap and funding. I think, Chris, if it's okay with you, if you could get a work group together, just a work group that could bring back a recommendation that would talk about the cap, maybe draft some language, and integrate what's required in section 14, subsection 2, because I think that could form the basis of what's being talked about in section 8. And what I'm understanding up here is that during the hearings on AB 81, that the cap was really 2018 plus inflation, period. So, but I think I'd like to have, not just people who want to help you come to that, and not necessarily come to that result, but help on that analysis, because if that's the case, then the cap is pretty easily defined. But, so,
Absolutely.
was that clear?
Somebody
Chris, I'm
just
sorry.
wants to let me know who's interested. Happy to help. Thank you.
Okay.
Up here, I think we have Dagny Stapleton is interested in being a part of the working group from NACO, and I think if Jeff Wells would be willing to serve, that would be very helpful.
Jeff?
Sure, anytime I get volunteered by Laura, I'll do it.
All right, thank you both, okay.
And if I could just interrupt, I don't know if Sophia Long, the Attorney General, could weigh in on that. When we talked to her, even if you change the name to a work group, you might be subject to open meeting law. So that was our concern, that if we do form some sort of work group, that they may be subject to open meeting law is what she informed us. So I don't know if we can get clarification on that.
Hi, Marcy. Deputy Attorney General Sophia Long. Yeah, I was just going to see how the work group kind of shook out first and who was going to be in it before we decide whether it was going to be subject to open meeting law. However, I did hear, I think right now, that there's going to be two voting members of this committee, correct? Already on the work group. So we'll see also what the purpose is, but so far it might be subject to open meeting. But again, I'll see.
And I would tend to understand that we don't have a quorum of the voting members. So I think that's what you're going to take a look at, because that should trigger then whether or not we actually have to have.
Well, we also had an update on working groups recently, which if you're, I believe if you're going to make any sort of recommendation that the entire board is going to act on, then it's subject to open meeting law. But from what I hear so far, for example, like Member Trum's work group seems to be, she's getting information from students. So I'll just let me, we'll just play it by ear right now. So.
All right, thank you.
Okay, can we go, how about the one we just discussed with Chris on talking about the budget, the dollars, the cap? What's your analysis on that?
I just had a question on the open meeting law issue. I've never thought it was as rigorous as everybody else did, but I don't have a commission anymore. But it seems to me that if you're going to have a working group, you can kind of avoid the problem by not making a decision, but just coming in and presenting facts and then arguing about it in the actual open meeting.
Well, Bill, that's my understanding too, but what I'm hearing from the lawyer, I don't remember the name, I couldn't hear the name, is Yvonne? Sophia, okay. Sophia, are we on the, I'm glad you're there first. Are we on the right track then if we have Chris and Jeff come with some language or some suggested language or discussion about the cap for counties?
Mr. Chair, in the past, you would be right. I do believe that there's been some updates. I just need to confer with my office that even if there's information that they're collecting that is going to be given, to this entire committee or this entire commission, and the commission acts on it via vote, that working group would be subject to open meeting law.
And again, I'm not trying to get around the open meeting law, but here we're staff poor, and
yes.
So take it like this, that maybe, have those folks report back to the executive director.
I will definitely get with your executive director and determine the conversations of the working groups, and then I can get in touch with your executive director as far as whether they are subject or not. So.
Okay, well, let us know, because I think what they could give their information back to the executive director. She could massage it, think about it, whatever, and then present what she wants to present, because she's the ultimate one that's going to be doing it. You get what I'm saying?
Yes, understood.
Okay.
And to make matters easier, I could always just meet with Dagny first and gather, and then I could meet with Jeff, so I'm not doing anything that doesn't kick your numbers in. But I make a suggestion, as we start to get more restrictive in the open meeting law interpretation, perhaps it's time again for the legislature to consider adding themselves to it. Just a
Amen, sister.
Okay. Well, okay, so we'll have those two groups kind of work among themselves, and then work with the executive director, and then we'll, if Sophia determines that they should be subject to the open meeting law, so be it. But I do think that we need smaller groups to work on these things. And again, I don't think anybody on this board is trying to go around the open meeting law. But as I said, we're staff poor, and we need to get this going. I guess that's, probably saying, I want to be on the line, I want to be on the right side of the line, but there's definitely a line. Okay. Anybody have any
And
questions?
then just right quick, this is Rob Tejas. If it's not going to ruin anything with the working group, I'd like to be on Chris's committee, or I should say working group. But we'll find out, I guess, here soon about that.
Okay. And then Sophia, would you let Marcy know just as soon as you can, because if we need to come back and create formal subcommittees, we'll do that.
Definitely, Mr. Chair, thank you.
All right. All right. Let's, where are we then?
I think we're at the presentation on the regulation with Sophia Long.
Go.
Sophia Long, Senior Deputy Attorney General, for the record. So regarding drafting your regulations, we talked earlier about that you guys are now in the area where you need to make regulations and standards. So I'll just briefly discuss the process. Our office did create a manual, an administrative rulemaking manual, which breaks down NRS 233B, which is basically where administrative rulemaking, the procedure is set forth. We're in the process of updating it. When it's finished being updated, I will give it to your executive director. Otherwise, the current manual is as clear as mud, and it's generated more questions than answers. So when it's finally done, I'll give it to Marcy. Basically, there's three types of regulations. There's permanent regulations, temporary regulations, and emergency regulation. So permanent regulation is, of course, what we all shoot for, and it just depends on timing as far as when you submit your draft regulations to LCB. So currently, we are in that time frame where if we submit our regulations to LCB, that they'll become permanent regulation, and specifically in 233B, it says any regulations submitted to LCB between July 2nd of an odd year to June 30th of an even year. If LCB reviews it and kicks it back to us, then it'll become a permanent regulation. So we have about 6 months to pretty much draft them and to send them in. And so basically the process starts is, of course, drafting the regulation, and usually staff does that. They're tasked with the workload with, of course, input, from all the members. And then another thing that happens is there needs to be a small business analysis. So that analysis needs to be done pretty much when you're done drafting your proposed regulations to see what sort of impact, your regulations are going to have on small businesses. And that small business is called a small business impact statement, will be sent to LCB with your proposed regulation. And I'm sorry, I talk fast, so if I'm talking too fast, let me know. During this regulation process, you do need to conduct at least one workshop. And what a workshop is it basically invites the general public to make any sort of comments, either good or bad, on the regulations to propose, any regulations that, if you want to adopt them. But it generally gives the public that time to give you input as far as how your draft regulations, look to them. So the workshop, you send it to LCB, and all LCB will do is they'll review your proposed regulations and make sure that, number one, that the regulations that you're proposing you pretty much have jurisdiction over. So you have the enabling statute, which right now is at AB 81, that it's pretty much your regulations are in confines with that. Sometimes they'll make changes, sometimes they won't. They should kick them back to you within 30 days. In my experience, it's never been 30 days or less. However, for example, if we turn in proposed regulations to LCB, let's just say June 15th, so when they kick him back, they'll be after the June 30th deadline. As long as they're in LCB before June 30th, they'll still be considered permanent regulations. And that's under the condition that when LCB sends them back, whatever changes they make, you can either approve them and keep them, or you can make more changes yourself. But if they're substantive changes, then they're considered new regulations. So it kind of kicks us out of that permanent regulation area. And I've hardly seen that happen in my experience. What I have seen is LCB is not quick to review. So, so when they come back and you review them, if you make changes, if you like them, then what you'll do again is conduct what's called a public hearing, and that's basically, it's basically like a workshop, but now we're pretty much saying, you know, these draft regulations are going to be final. So it again invites the public to come and to speak and to make comment and to put on record whether, you know, they agree, disagree, you know, whatever. And at that time, you're still, you know, still welcome to make changes. Otherwise, you'll do what's called a final adoption, and that's pretty much everybody agreeing to, these are the regulations that we'd like to pretty much, you know, set in stone, and then they would go back to LCB after you do a final adoption hearing. And then they'll include it at their next legislative commission meeting, and that's pretty much the process in a nutshell, even though it seems quick, it's not, regarding drafting regulations. And I see member Chris shaking her head, and yes, I know, yeah. So does anyone have any questions? I know it was quick, I'm sorry. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, I think, yeah, and I apologize, Sophie, I didn't know you were down there, but I'm glad to have the lawyers look over our shoulders on it. I really am. So that's a good thing. Let me talk to the board here a minute. We have a couple items on the agenda. One, you know, is how often we want to meet. And then I'd like to have a motion that would speak to, you know, what deliverables we're going to ask Marcy to bring to us at the next meeting. You know, but I think we need to know if we need to do meetings monthly or quarterly. You probably saw Marcy's note that said, you know, until we get this off the ground, we might want to meet monthly on the last Thursday of each month. Does that work with everybody?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, go.
It works throughout the whole year with two exceptions. In January, you and I and Dave and many others are supposed to be in Las Vegas for the Public Lands and NACO meeting. So with that one meeting, is it possible to move that one back to a Tuesday or Wednesday or later, the following week or something?
Oh, there's always somebody who's got, yeah. Well,
somebody is
all right.
always going to have,
Did everybody hear that down there? We have a problem with January.
So do I, and I think everybody kind of ran into it that last week, but otherwise the last Thursday seemed to work for most folks. But
So, Chris, what's a good time down there? We'll do let me just throw this out here. The last Friday on each month, with the exception of January, we're going to do that one. What's a good date for everybody?
Just to clarify, are we doing last Thursday as proposed? with the
I'm
exception
sorry,
of
last
January?
Thursday, and thank you very much, I apologize. The last Thursday
sure.
of each month, except for January, and we want to do that. What's a good date?
How about the 29th? Are you guys still in that?
yeah, that's good. Works for me.
29th, so that would be the Wednesday?
Everybody hear that down there?
The 29th, how does that look down there? Is a Wednesday?
So you're proposing Wednesday, the 29th of January, and then otherwise on the last Thursday of every month going forward?
Yes.
I think everyone down here seems to be good with the Wednesday, the 29th as a substitute.
All right. Can we have a motion?
Is that
for-
in the morning or the afternoon? Or in general, are we having morning or afternoon meetings that would be useful, or do we want to alternate?
You know, my sense is, you know, we'll do it whatever the board is convenient with. My sense is we're probably better off doing it in the morning on that. I mean, just because everybody's fresh to do those things. The other side of that is because we've got all day to argue.
On the 29th? We're looking at our calendars down here just
Okay.
momentarily. Go ahead.
yeah, they're checking to see if the morning or afternoon would work. I won't be here on the 29th. I'm out of the country on the last week, but you don't need me for a quorum, so that's fine.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, I agree with you. We have public lands at 3 o'clock on the last Thursday of every month. So if we could do it earlier in the day, I would appreciate it, but I'm good with it. I'll do whatever has.
So one problem down here is just that I'm hearing people say that their mornings tend to just be busier in general. So at least alternating them would probably be better than having them all in the morning, or? So how about, I may have just misheard. Is there a monthly meeting in the afternoon at 3 p.m. or is that just a one-time thing?
No, it's a monthly
The
meeting.
conflict arena just.
But it, it's like Chris says, it's me, one person. I don't know if Dave's involved. Usually Bob is, but you don't need me, to make a quorum.
Well, it's not ideal to. Ideally we get something that at least looks like people are going to we can all be there.
May I offer a medium ground and say 11 o'clock?
They're checking again. Again, those that have to go to court, the mornings are hard for them. So let's see what Jeff and Drew come up with.
So-
Bob, how about you?
Is the suggestion to move all meetings to 11 o'clock or just that one day's meeting?
I think all meetings because Lorena has a standing conflict in the afternoon on Thursdays. On the last Thursday of the month. If I'm wrong about that, please correct me.
Well, is the conflict because it's the last Thursday of the month?
Maybe we should pick a different
Yeah,
Thursday.
maybe we could pick the third Thursday of the month or the second Thursday of the month and still do the afternoons.
I think we should then look at our calendars to see just what they are, so we don't goof this
I
up.
can't do the first and third Thursday, so I've got a board of supervisors meeting.
But the second Thursday?
I could do the second Thursday and the fourth Thursday. And I could do any other day other than those 2 days.
Yeah, the second Thursday of the month looks
Okay, too.
So would that include January, the 9th? Yeah, so maybe, I'm not sure where that leaves us in the beginning. So I guess maybe we should, I think we're all good down here on the second Thursday.
Okay, I can't
Except
make
maybe-
that. Not that it matters, but I can't make that, and I couldn't make the second Thursday in February. Can we stay with the January, whatever it was, 29th, and then figure it out?
yeah, I agree with that.
I think we're all good on the 29th of January.
All right, what time of day?
Afternoon,
Okay,
I thought.
let's just set that one down. And you want to have somebody down there make a motion, so I know that we're taking care of everybody down there?
So I
For the-
think
just
the
for the Jan-
proposal
just
right
for the
now
Jan-
is
just for the January meeting.
January. that-
Yeah, just for January.
Right, I move that in January, we reconvene on January 29th at 1 PM.
I'll second that.
Second. Yeah, second.
Okay, we've got a motion, and second by Chris, second by Lorinda. All right, on the motion, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Carried, okay. Next meeting, Marcy, you'll put that out?
Yes, and the meeting will be held at the old Assembly Chamber at the Capitol rather than in the LCV.
Okay. Moving right around and right along. All right, so now that we know where January is, let's talk about the deliverables we want for our staff for the January meeting. And some of them that I see coming up, and I just throw them out. A draft of something along the lines that would deal with the complaint procedure, the minimum standards concept, a report from Delphi, and also something to do with a discussion on the cap for local governments. And those are just suggestions. I mean, to put them in or take them out, or if there's anything else. This is just for
we'll have to-
January. I think, Marcy, you and I have talked, you've got drafts of some of that stuff that could already be done?
Yes, I've been working on the complaint. We have to build the website ourselves, so that's something that we're also working on doing. The minimum standards, Jared Hickman has been working on those, and I will get you copies of the Delphi report, and I have some examples that I can do for my request for information, and we will work with Chris to try and prepare a formula that we can present to you.
What do you think about that down south?
That sounds ambitious, but good to us, I think. If it can be done, and
Well, and I think, Sophia makes a good point, because we're gonna be running up against, deadlines for regulation purposes, so let's see what we can get done. If we need to move it, we can move it, but I think let's try and be aggressive at the beginning here and see where we go. All right, so can I have a motion, if it's okay, I think it's permissible here, can I have a motion that we ask our staff to bring back to us, draft language for receiving and resolving complaints, draft language on the minimum standards for delivery of indigent defense, a report from what you can find from Delphi, and a report or draft language on the cap that counties will be subject to. In the event there is corrective action or just the cap, period, under Section 8 and Section 14, I think it was. Okay.
I'll make that motion.
All right, there's a motion to that effect. Down south, anybody want to second that motion? So I don't want to leave you folks out down there.
I will second the motion.
Okay, there's a motion and a second on the motion. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 That wasn't a very,
Aye.
that wasn't a very enthusiastic aye.
Aye.
All right, all right. So we have future meetings. We have the presentation on developing regulations. Marcy, do we need to do anything else before we take up concluding public comment?
No.
Down south, anything you want to
Mayor?
bring up for future
Yeah,
meetings?
this is Jeff Wells
Hi,
again.
Jeff.
So I know we've set the one meeting for January. I still have, and I mentioned this to Marcy, and I know we have limited budgets, but it would seem to me that we ought to try maybe at least quarterly or so of having a meeting where we can all be together at the same time, because I think we'll have better results if we have better interaction and everybody's together. And then I also thought it might be good as we get a little further into this to actually hold some of these meetings out into the rural communities itself, where the local public defender, judges, everybody else would feel very comfortable just coming over and talking to us about what their issues are. Now, I know we have a very limited budget. My suggestion might be that during this time span between now and the next meeting, each of us could potentially go back to our own sponsoring person and see if we could come up with budget to cover the travel for the rest of this fiscal year. So, for example, I could go back and see if Clark County could pay for Drew and I's travel to do one of these out-of-town meetings between now and the end of the fiscal year. And if everybody else could do that, even if not everybody was successful in that, it would take the pressure off the budget. Just something to think about between now and the next meeting.
I think that's a great idea. Good idea. Okay, anything else?
This is Ann. I just wanted.
Sure.
I wanted to just to tag on to that. Are a number of you already coming to Las Vegas for this other meeting that was the reason why we couldn't meet on one of those Thursdays? And is there a possibility that we could actually get together, on the tail or before or after that other meeting?
Well, Ann, this is Lorinda. I was playing a bit of a game, because if I'm required to come to Carson City or to Las Vegas for another meeting where I'm being sponsored by the county, then my cost is paid for by the county. However, I have not been recommended to this board by the county. This is a NACO appointment for me. So therefore, my travel cost needs to go elsewhere, which is this bunch, our group. It's not a county expense. However, like today, I met with NAS over next door. So I was able to, this whole trip has been paid for by the county. So that's what I was trying to do, Ann, was to minimize the expenses to this group.
So then to follow up on Ann's question, if you and the mayor are going to be in Las Vegas at the end of January, did I miss that?
I'm not gonna be down there, but I'll take care of my own travel costs. I don't
Yeah,
put it
well,
on,
yeah.
I don't put it on anybody. I don't put it on this commission or anybody. It's my
Yeah.
own, period.
I mean, I think that's a wonderful idea that we all get together. And I think, I would hope that Clark County and Washoe County and whatever counties can do it, would pay for travel, not for every meeting, but we need to get it together and meet each other and work together. I would hope the State Bar would pay for Julia Kavanaugh bill, but if not, we can work some of this out. And you're right, Jeff, if we know it's just 2 people we're gonna be paying for, then we can decide if that would be worth it, rather than 7, because we can't afford 7.
All right, well, let's think how that's gonna work. We'll, for the January meeting, we'll meet up, we'll do the same thing we're doing here by teleconference, I think, right? And then after that, we're gonna talk about, meeting together in, probably in the south in Vegas, and then some meetings out in the rural areas. Okay, all right. So we're on for the meeting.
Mayor?
Yes, shoot, go ahead.
Are you saying you're going to self-fund on this travel?
I just do that. I mean, Bill, you know, I don't have time to fool around
Well,
with all the rigmarole for money, so I just pay for it.
Well, I'm just saying, if you're going to do that, I'll do that.
Okay. By the way, I've still got your writ of mandate to get my dog out of jail, so.
Yeah, in Ray Hummer, is that what it
In
was?
Ray Hummer, that's right.
Yeah.
I never forget it. Okay, all right. Anything else to come before us today? Anybody?
Could I just add one thing?
Sure.
This is Marcy Reba again. Jared and I were discussing that the next meeting, we would like to appear down in the south, and we were hoping to get in contact with Ann to possibly go around the college and meet some of the law students. So we are hoping to go down there and be present in Vegas for the next meeting.
Very good, okay. All right, wonderful.
Sounds great to us. Thanks.
Okay, anything else? I didn't mean to go too fast and say that we're trying to do all these things, but I think we got to kind of move along real quick here, then we can take a break, slow down a little bit. All right, are we ready to adjourn or not? Anybody got anything for concluding public comment? Anybody?
We do have some public comment in the south.
Good.
Franny
Okay.
Forsman is here.
Hi, Franny.
Hi. Over here, okay, I won't bend the mic. I'm gonna bend it towards justice. Franny Forsman, for the record. There are 2 things that I just wanted to comment on. One was that there has been a massive, 2 times there have been a massive data collection in the federal system that might be helpful. It's probably more elaborate than what you would want to do in the state system, but there's a lot of work that's gone into it in terms of weighted caseloads. And I've forgotten what the second thing was. I'm assuming that the executive director is using the performance standards adopted under ADKT 411 as a starting point for standards, since you've requested the a draft as a deliverable.
You want to answer that, Marcy?
The easy answer is yes, we are using that to create the standards, and we are trying to
Great.
put it together with the Supreme Court rules on capital cases as well. So we're trying to merge everything together.
Great. That's all, thank you.
Say hello to Elgin. Okay. Anybody else down south? Anybody in the north? We ready to adjourn? Ready? Okay, without objection, then we will we'll stand adjourned until January 29th at 1 o'clock at our respective places. Okay? We're adjourned.
Mr. Chair?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, you can adjourn. However, I just wanted to remind everyone to stay because Craig Newby is going to be talking to you. So don't leave,
Don't leave.
basically.
Okay, we're ready to do that. All right. So we're going to close the doors up here too?
Yes, please, if you can let the public leave and close the doors.
All right, we're adjourned. We'll be talking to council.
And Marcy, is Craig up there?
No, I think he was waiting for you to call him. He's not here yet. Want to go look on the second floor?